And welcome to a borderline Ben's Junk / regular archive episode. The show where the leftovers are better than the original meal. So, speaking of leftovers, today's episode is something of a reheated version of an old Ben's Junk I did about 5 years ago. And on that episode, I covered my Sony TT100 tuner timer unit. And I did a rotten, shaky, dark, wobbly job, even by my low standards. Now, I mentioned in that episode that my little U-Matic rig was a perpetual work in progress. Well, I'd like to think that I finally got this one wrapped up. So what I want to do today is take the opportunity to show off Sony's, frankly, somewhat half-hearted stab at a domestic home video recording rig. It also just so happens to be the first real stab at such a thing to see release in North America. And so with that, it's time for a mini history lesson. Insert your own ding here. So anyway, in 1970, Philips demoed their N1500 VCR unit at that year's Consumer Electronics Show, and VCR equaling video cassette recording. And that was the name of Philips's format, VCR. But anyway, depending on your source, sometime in 71 or maybe early 72, the Philips N1500 was released, but only in PAL territory Europe, so the UK, Germany, and a few others. Now, here in the States, in the fall of 1971, Sony introduced their first three U-Matic 3/4-inch video cassette machines, the VP1000, the VP1100, and the VO1600. Now, only the 1600 was capable of recording. And the 1600 also had a TV tuner built in, something unique to Sony's U-Matics, but just that, a tuner, no timer. Now, I think this may have been intentional from the get-go because very soon thereafter, Sony introduced the TT100 tuner timer unit, which allowed users to schedule unattended recordings for up to 24 hours in advance. And I say intentional because, as far as I know, most, if not all, 70s era Sony U-Matics, certainly the record-capable ones, have the appropriate socket for that tuner timer. And just as a bit of trivia here, the TT100 could also schedule playback and not just recordings. You just take the record button out of the tape and you're good. Not sure why you would want that, but it exists. But anyway, getting back on track here, I can't find anything concrete, but it looks like the TT100 probably beat the Avco Cartrivision, which is really the first explicitly domestic video cassette recorder in North America, to the market by at least 2 to 4 months. And not only that, the Cartrivision was initially only available in Chicago area Sears department stores. It didn't go national until September, so it came out in Chicago in June of 72, went national in September. But finally coming back around to my U-Matic setup, let's spend this episode looking at and demoing the first full-fledged, if somewhat unintentional and somewhat half-hearted, home video recording rig to be available in North America. This was easily one of my all-time great thrift store finds. I got this in East Denver in 2016 or maybe even late 2015, and I think I paid $13 for it. Unfortunately, it had already taken some cosmetic damage. That veneer was already long gone when I got it. And also some dust found its way into the clock housing. That is not a reflection or an optical illusion. That is indeed a cloud of dust in there. But I've never been able to get this thing apart enough to clean it out, at least not without me thinking I'm going to damage something much greater, so I just live with it. But anyway, this also belonged to a Denver AV company called Sevco, and you'll see their emblem in just a minute here. And that was a company I actually dealt with a few times years ago. So it was a little weird, kind of, sort of, technically buying something off of them. But anyway, cosmetic issues aside, it is indeed in good working order. Up on top here, we've got the tuner. And so the right knob, as labeled, will handle the VHF channels, 2 through 13. Now, if we want to do UHF, we have to go a step below channel 2. And then from here, we can go all the way up to channel 83. But I'm not going to go that far. And I normally keep this on 3. Now, down here, we've got 2 switches. The left one is for automatic fine-tuning, which is a moot point in the post-analog era. Then we've got the source switch, which is a moot point if you're going to be recording directly into the VCR via composite. But nonetheless, we've got the choice between TV and VTR, videotape recorder. I just leave it at TV because it's uniform. So on the front here, we've got effectively 3 knobs. So starting with the bottom, this is a 2-part knob. So the inner part sets the timer, and you can see it cranking away right by my thumb there. Probably hear it too. And then the outer part controls the flip clock proper. And of course, it being a flip clock, if you overshoot the time, you can't go back. So you have to go through all 24 hours again to take another crack at it. You can't unring a bell, so to speak. But let's show that. Now, this top knob turns the timer on and off. So when it's on, it will choke the power to the VCR. And you'll see that in action a little later on. On the back, on the top, we've got the terminals for VHF and UHF antennas. And of course, you unscrew them and you can put the good old devil's pitchforks on them, just like we used to do in the old days. And of course, that's a moot point now. Now, down here on the left side, we've got an AC outlet, which you connect the U-Matic deck to. And this is what makes the VCR dependent on the TT100. So now, instead of the VCR itself being the heart of the rig, it's actually the tuner timer. We can't so much as turn on the VCR without the TT100 being on first. Now, down here, we've got just a good old-fashioned coax cable, RF, and I haven't had any luck with this, but as best as I can gather, it's meant to work in tandem with the antenna stuff. So there's yet another moot point. And of course, we got to have our big, nasty, ugly, heavy 8-pin connector. Pretty sure this is one of Sony's proprietary deals. Call it a hunch. And yeah, this goes into the back of the machine and makes them communicate. Now, on the right side here, we've got another AC outlet, and you can hook this to a TV if you want, and a coax output, which you can run to a TV if you want, and then make it run from the TT100 as opposed to the VCR. And lastly, of course, gotta have the power plug. Okay, so my U-Matic isn't from 1971 or 72 or 73 for that matter. But there's nothing on this particular model that wasn't already on Sony's U-Matics in 1972. At least nothing that had been significantly updated. Actually, I don't think anything had been updated at all as of this point. So I think we're going to maintain our period accuracy here. But anyway, this is a VO, and that stands for Video Office, VO 2600. Now, I cannot find any hard dates as to when this model was made. The best I've been able to deduce is sometime in the, we'll call it the 1974 to 78 range, even though the earliest hard evidence of this model I found is from 75. It could have been introduced in 74. So with that time period in mind, we'll just plop things right in the middle and we'll call my unit 1976. Unfortunately, I've never found any identifying marks on the machine, at least any that I know how to decode. But anyway, since I'm going to be focusing more on the recording aspect of things here, I'm only going to go over certain parts of this machine. So back in 2014, when I first got this VCR, I did a full-blown regular archive episode on just U-Matic in general. And you can get a full rundown on this particular machine in that episode. But anyway, there are a lot of things to do before we can set the timer to record our show. So let's do as much as we can here without the TT100. So we're going to have to go into guerrilla mode here for a bit. So first off, we're going to want to make sure that our audio levels are good. And the way to do that is to connect a pair of headphones, and you can see that in here. This is really just for show. I've already adjusted all this stuff. But you've got that, and you'll want some sort of signal running into the machine for you to monitor and gauge. But we'll get a little deeper into that later. And here are the VU meters and the audio recording levels. So one for the left channel, one for the right. So yes, we are dealing in stereo here. And what you're going to want to do is have it peak somewhere in the -3 to 0 dB range. So really like just only the absolute peaks coming in right at 0. And so upon playback, it will more than likely read a bit hotter than that. But since we're dealing in analog here, it's going to be more tape saturation than outright clipping. So that's okay. And of course, you're going to want to make sure your levels are equal as well. And that's also part of the headphones. So aside from that, you'll want your tracking in the center fixed position, and it's got a little notch in there so it stops when it's in that main position. And we'll want our audio limiter on to mellow out any rogue peaks in the audio signal. And we're going to have the input select set to line because we're going to be recording composite in. So even though this is off air and even though there's an antenna involved, since that antenna is not going directly to the VCR or the TT100, we're going to treat it like it's just dubbing from another U-Matic deck. Now, you can also, if you like, isolate each audio channel, but we don't really need to here. And even though we're dealing more than likely in mono here, the stuff that I'm going to record, you'll want to keep it in mix so it's equal on both left and right, so effectively dual mono, but I guess the commercials might be in stereo. And having said that, it'll be more useful, that channel selector, if you're going to be using microphones, which I actually have not done yet. That's the only thing I haven't done with this, and I guess I just haven't felt a need to. It just doesn't seem like something that I would want to do. But anyway, let me take a cut here so I can hook up the TT100, and then we're gonna finally get started. Okay, so we're more or less ready to start setting up our recording. So the first thing we're going to want to do is pop in a tape, and don't mind that scratched off label. When I got this, somebody had already bulk erased it, so there was something on here presumably at one point, but in my possession it is indeed a blank. Okay. So now let's just pretend that my clock is some semblance of accurate, and it's already kind of preset, so I guess we'll just go through the time again. It is not 11 p.m. when I'm doing this, but let's set it for, I guess, 11:30. Buy myself a little lead time there. And we've already been over this, the top of the TT100. In this case, we don't have to do anything, so yeah. All right, so the signal flow is as follows, and I think I'm going to need a flashlight. We got my old rabbit ears, which is running, because the reception around here just sucks, to my 24 dB antenna booster, which is running to this DTV converter box. And the only reason that's on the floor is because the longest set of cables I had free at the moment only got me this far. Now, since we're recording composite, I guess this would be a good time to go over this. So this doesn't record composite kind of as we know it. It does it on what it refers to as UHF connectors, which is actually PL259. So yeah, we're getting into amateur radio territory there. So I got some adapters, PL259 on one end, and the more common RCA phono-styled composite input on the other side. So now, if I hit the record button, we should be able to see a bit of what's airing right now, and we'll just make sure that everything's working. And hitting record will only put us into record monitoring mode. So if I want to actually record, it would have to be record and forward. There is no play on here. But let me point the camera here. So I'm hitting the record button. And there we go. And I'm just doing a bit of the antenna TV channel tonight. It's the only thing around here that broadcasts in the old 4:3 aspect ratio. But we do have audio. The VU meters are bouncing away, so we're good there. And yeah, you can always check it with headphones if you like. But yeah, I'd say we're looking good. So let me hit the stop button and we'll come out of monitor mode. Lovely. Now, there's one more piece of gear that we still need to hook up. None of this would work without this little hunk of plastic. This is the Sony FA20 timer recording adapter. And these were included with the VCR at the time. And just about everybody misplaced them or simply threw them out. As such, these things are fairly rare at this point. But amusingly, this is just a hunk of plastic with a couple of rubber pieces on the underside. And so as best as I can tell, when the time comes for your recording, the tuner timer will send out some kind of low-level charge which will exert just enough power to trigger the record and forward buttons, you know, the magic formula for a manual recording. And yes, those rubber pieces do indeed line up with those buttons. So what we got to do here is attach this to the VCR. There's a couple of little holes that they go to, so we'll start at the top left and work our way down into the bottom right. And with that attached, well, we'll need to turn on the timer first, but it'll just be a waiting game after that. Now, I do have a few notes here. One, there is no way to set the duration of a recording. The machine will just record until the tape runs out. Two, U-Matic usually peaked at 60 minutes per tape. I mean, there are longer ones and certainly shorter ones, but 60 minutes was kind of the average, and certainly for consumers that bought them, people trying to do the home recording thing. Three, there is only one recording speed, and that is 3 3/4 inches per second. And four, when the tape does finally run out, the machine will do nothing. It'll stay on. So if you set a recording and you're not home, you will come home to find your VCR still on, even if you've been on vacation for a month and it was on the day you left. And five, the tape will not rewind until you remove this, and it'll start doing it automatically. So let's get this going. Let's turn on the timer. It'll choke the power. And let's get this bad boy attached. And so the waiting begins. There we go. Because my little state-of-the-art recording rig, by early mid-70s standards at least, didn't look enough like it was on life support, I've got one more last piece of gear to tackle. And there's very little to it, so it will not take long. But this is the Sony RM420 wired remote control. And it's basically just a chunk ripped right out of the VCR's control panel. Almost identical design, but just designed for the couch potato in all of us. But the thing is that it's only about 12 feet from the back of the U-Matic to my preferred spot on the love seat behind me. But if I want to use this remote, I have to set up camp on the floor just in front of the love seat. This just doesn't quite make it. But anyway, before I kick back and watch my tape, to put this in a little perspective, my estimated cost in 1976 dollars for the VCR, the tuner timer unit, the remote control, a couple of blank tapes, and a totally arbitrary 7% sales tax comes out to around $2,200. Adjusted for inflation, as of my making this, we're floating at about $10,200 for my tricked out, first of its kind home video recording rig. And worth every penny as far as I'm concerned. So anyway, that is almost it for this installment of Ben's Junk. So I am going to kick back, as much as I can anyway, and watch my tape. And I will leave you with a few little direct feed excerpts of it. But I guess to get things started here, I guess I can bring you along with me for just a minute. So all that's left to do now is hit play, or forward, as it were. So let's do just that. And of course it would be a coach rerun. It couldn't be anything from the early 70s or earlier to make this completely appropriate. But oh well. That is it for me on the vocal front for today. I will talk to you again soon.
Is you don't get any money if you don't bring any in.
Well, if that's true, why aren't they cutting the baseball team?
Selling a home is expensive and stressful, so we set out to create a better home selling experience with a network of the most successful real estate agents in America that'll sell your home for as little as a 2% commission.
The icing on the cake with the ideal agent was that we saved $12,000 in commission.
Ooh, no going. Semi-going. No, totally going. Nope. Going? No, thank you. No going. Nope.
Okay, now we're going. Give out your number anytime with a free second number from TextNow. Download today and get going.
You going, girl?
Get out of this. My seat. Bite me.
Becker tonight at 1 Eastern on
Antenna TV.
I got to pack it up, transport it, unpack it, all without paying rent. What a lifesaver.
Nobody wants contracts. I love that U-Box is month to month.
With my discount coupon, I have 30 days to use a U-Box container.
Introducing Copperfit Ice, the world's first compression sleeve to include the cooling sensation of menthol and the energizing properties of CoQ10.